Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Fadumo. So I'm just making a quick feedback video to everyone as I process the materials for their observation. So Alhamdulillah, it was a very good lesson, Sister. You're a very good teacher. And there's a lot to say that was very, very good. More than I can go over here, as I'm note taking. I note through things that were strengths, and I had quite a bit marked, so you'll have the raw notes sent you, and you can see that. I would like, if you would consider having a class video recorded. I understand religious inhibitions against that. I certainly understand it with photo taking. I do know some of the ulama in Saudi who were traditionally very, very conservative about photo taking, like Sheikh bin Baz and Sheikh Albani, Sheikh Uthaymeen. They would allow it for video. Sheikh bin Baz, I know, has a fatwa that if there's moving motion, it's not the same. I understand it being a sister, like we can do blurring, we can handle the file, give you control over anything. If whatever sensitivities you have about it, I understand it. But if it can be worked around, there is some things that would benefit your colleagues seeing. I would like to create opportunities for, and we can have people observe you, your colleagues observe you, make time for that. But video is an efficient way to do it. And I would like for the teachers at As-Suffah to see each other doing good things. Some of those things, in particular, like I said, there's a lot that's good about the class that you can see noted in the notes. I particularly appreciate the way you balance being charismatic when instructing on the material versus being credible and calm when you have to manage. So it's very distinct when you're teaching something and then you have to pause to manage something. Your body language changes, you execute the nonverbals very well, and your volume goes down, which is a really big thing because a lot of adults and teachers, they have the tendency that when they got to address something, their volume goes up. And teachers are getting better at that at As-Suffah, but you do that very, very well. And you do it in a way that enables it so when you do have to address a kid verbally, the kid's very receptive to it, and you're able to do that in a low volume in a way where the kid doesn't feel singled out or anything. And it all keeps things running along smooth very, very well. So that's something I'd like to see. And just also to the transitions, okay? That show me one, show me two, show me three transition at the end was excellent. And it was very, very tight. It is the ideal way that I want transitions to look. If fourth graders can do it, the other grades can do it as well. And it's certainly something that we want the middle school to draw on when these kids go in there next year. And with them, and when we get into the new building, especially because the kids will be doing more transitioning in and out of classrooms, especially in middle school. So that is something I just like people to see. It's just not the same when it's just audio. When people can see it, it's more powerful, and you can lead a session or talk through like how you got to that point with the kids. I know you used interactive modeling to do it, but just why were you able to get it to a finer point is important. I also thought along with that at the same time and just throughout the lesson, you held the kids to very high accountability, had very high expectations for the kids. You executed that with the promptness with which you address things to the kids. You address things whenever they were small and at first instance instead of waiting, and how that has contributed to having in general a disciplined culture and high expectations classroom. All that's just important things for the staff to see, especially as we're trying to raise that with everybody as we move into the new building. So I want you to think about how you can relay that stuff to your colleagues, how some of that can be transferred to your colleagues. What's a way that we could maybe do a lesson that is video recorded for the benefit of everyone else. I'd like you to think that. I thought you gave the kids two very high expectations messaging with the transition to Quran and talking about being prepared for the other teacher and that type of stuff. I thought that was good, and leveraging your relationship with them to help another teacher. I thought all of that was very, very high leveled. I thought that the sequence of the class was, of course, very, very good. You had the I do, we do, the you do. laid out very, it all played out very, very naturally. You did a good job with the input output of teacher input and soliciting output for the students. Maybe could incorporate a little bit more things that solicit all class responses during the instruction versus things that are just who can tell me or who can give me an example, and where it's one kid participating. Now, I will say that a lot of kids raise their hands and that type of stuff when you ask that participation. So that demonstrates that kids are on, they're keyed into the learning and they're on track with it and they're ready to learn and participate. But I've talked with some other teachers about, and I might go over to the other PD. There's ways you can get some nonverbal response or some choral response from them, maybe a little bit more. That just has all the kids participating. Okay. Some pointers or some things that could be refined or enhanced. So I have on here. This was right before they got set off to write their own fables, and this is what's on the board. And they were set up for all that very, very well. So a couple things with that I thought you could have done to enrich this a little bit more and push them for a little bit more. And then also with transitioning to independent work. Okay, so firstly, the whole thing is played out here. Okay, they read the fable. The class wrote the fable together. They're ready to write it. So you have the criteria in red of what the fable has to entail. You have the fable written on the right. I thought before you transition to the independent work, you could have modeled for them like a think aloud or like a self-check of adjudicating the fable that was written alongside the fable, and you could have said to them, okay, now when I finish writing or when you finish writing your fable, you have to go through it and make sure you have all of the criteria that we sent of a fable. So if I look through that, do we have a character who's an animal? Yes, we do. We have whatever it was. Do we have a setting? Yes, we do. You may be like, you have those criteria marked 1, 2, 3, 4 on there. You maybe could have, like, in red within the story, marked a 1 next to where the character was, marked a 2 next to where the setting was. Some kids, that little extra level of explicitness is helpful. And for some kids, they might rush through it a little bit. They could actually miss one of those things, such as the problem or something, or maybe really describing the setting. And that little bit more of explicit thinking about connecting what we're doing, about checking, like you went through it as you're going through it, but then rechecking. That is something that you could have, I thought, modeled. And, just checking after you've written something that you did it well is an important thing. Now, on that, the kids worked independently very, very well. I was very happy to see them working silently and completely independent. They have a little bit more of a tendency to do that when they're doing writing work versus like math or discrete problems, that type of stuff. But that wasn't something that you had to do much prodding or anything for, so I was happy to see that. So, like, when there were... So I've talked with a lot of teachers, and I talked in PD about exit directions. And giving the kids some criteria, some like behavior criteria of what to do and how it should look when you set them off to independent work. Now you have the visual on the board of what they're supposed to do, which helps them. Now, even though you have them doing the independent work, you can still use exit directions to utilize and enhance their learning. So you can write, okay, you need to, step 1. Write your story, or maybe step 1 is think about your story, because some of them might benefit from taking a moment to think about it. Step 2, write your story. Then step 3, check your story that you have everything. Also in the exit criteria and kind of going along with that, or the exit directions, going along with having something written on the board and this idea of like checking the criteria, you could even add some criteria in that to make sure that they do it to a certain level, okay? So like you could review and count how many sentences you have in the written passage and say, like the last step can be make sure you have 7 sentences, or make sure you have 10 clauses if they know clauses well enough and our kids know grammar better than the average elementary school kid at As-Suffah. This is a way we take advantage of that knowledge. If we're not confident they know, and I just say clauses instead of sentences because it's a better criteria, because a clause has an actual unit of meaning, whereas like you could say 7 sentences, but if they just write 7 simple sentences, then they can do it too easily. If you have clauses, which would be more, like you could say 7 sentences, but if you say 12 clauses, it means that they have to either have more simple sentences or have some complex and compound sentences in there. Okay, that type of thing. And even that type of grammar criteria. Okay, I was in a 3rd grade class doing grammar. The kids at least had some familiarity with compound and complex sentences. So we want to draw on that. You can like, so you can put that in the exit criteria. Now, if you don't want to make that a full criteria for that type of thing, you could put like bonus, or you could have it a theme, like advanced level, like you add like an advanced level, you're going to have this, or you're going to have that. Something like that I thought could have added a little bit to how you set them off on the independent work, and maybe added a little bit more rigor to what you're asking them to do. Okay, now another thing that I'm asking teachers to do, especially in a situation like this where they were set up well, okay, the way the class went, what they have left on the board, they're going to be able to write the fable after this, all right? So when the instruction has gone well, which we want to have happen every time, and we're setting them off to independent work, we want to set them off to independent work with 80% confidence that 80% of the kids are going to be able to do it, or they're at least going to be able to do it to an 80% level or whatever. So I want, and from what I've seen, the observations, teachers are doing that. Okay, for the most part, they're setting them off onto independent work, and they're ready to do it. It's been well taught. They're set up for it. So if that's the case, I want you to try not going to helping kids immediately. Okay, I have in my notes that you set them off to independent work. Excuse me. Sorry. I have my notes that you set them off to independent work and you immediately went to kids helping this type of stuff, all right? Now why I want you, and you can, you have all these little like sub routines and sub expectations with the kids that they know. So you can start telling the kids, look, when you guys are working independently now, I'm not helping anyone for 5 minutes. Okay, for 5 minutes, I'm not helping anyone. I'm just going to monitor from the front of the room, and I expect everyone to get started and to be working for those 5 minutes. And the independent work, a lot of time, it's better if it starts this way. Why? Some kid, like when they're set up to do, there's no reason a kid shouldn't be able to be starting a fable here, okay? Even the one girl who I know was like feeling a little emotional or whatever, and you did a good job addressing her during the class, and she said something was wrong or whatever. Even a girl like her, that 5 minutes of not helping anyone, it holds kids accountable for getting started themselves, and they should be able to get started themselves with the way that the lesson was taught. I don't want kids to get into that. Some of our kids too, they have this thing where like they know what they need to do basically, but they always want this final confirmation from a teacher. Like, can I write about this? Is it okay if I do this? And with some subject areas, most of the non-Islamic subject areas, just a lot of things, they got to start getting over that. And I wasn't able to hear like the individual feedback you were giving kids or what those exchanges were like, but especially if that's the case, especially if when you go to some kids immediately and their immediate thing is like this kind of asking permission to go forward this way, that is some learned helplessness there, or that's some kind of learned, like they're always like, oh, I always want to this final approval to go forward, that type of thing. They got to start doing themselves and having the confidence to do it themselves. And with some kids, like they're not always incentivized to, like the only reason that they wouldn't be able to start the independent work here is if they weren't paying attention. Okay, either they have this little insecurity kick about getting started until they get that final individual confirmation from the teacher, in which case we want them to be weaned off of that, or if they weren't paying attention. If they weren't paying attention, they got to figure it out. And if they got to figure it out, there is still enough on the board, although you don't have the direct directions to write a fable, but I mean, it was clear from the class. There's enough visually on the board that they should be able to do it, okay, if they got to grapple for a minute to get going independently. So that's something I want you to try to start doing, okay? And just the other thing here, I think there was only one time where you mentioned like recess, doing something during recess, or class points, that type of thing. So we've talked a little bit about that. I'm not saying to not do it. I'm not saying that. You have it there sometimes. It doesn't look like you're using it excessively or anything based on what's the board. So I don't know. But, maybe challenge yourself to go a day without referring to any of that stuff and see how it goes. Okay, the kids are pretty highly responsive to you. You have the routines, you have the things set up in the class. So maybe a challenge for yourself. See if you can get through a day without having that. Okay, with trying not to go to those extrinsic motivators type things. Just see how you can do. Okay, the final thing. When reading The Tortoise and the Hare. Okay, it was round robin reading, or if the kids choose the person, then you call it popcorn reading. I think you called it popcorn reading. Okay. So look, just on that, I'm gonna send you this article, which is a chapter from a book on reading instruction. If you want students to read widely and well, eliminate round robin reading. Okay, though it sounds a little provocative, but this is a very good article, and it is an article that is based on sound, thorough, and the most scientific research in reading instruction. Reading instruction is something that has been widely researched. There are conclusions about what works and what does not work that are very sound. And round robin reading, essentially, like, there's even research that shows fairly well it could actually have some negative results. Some problems with it. It's only one kid reading at a time. So you have other kids being more or less passive. I know they're following along with it, but they're not getting practice reading. In the elementary school grades especially, and just some things that are correlated with increasing the ability with comprehension skills is fluency, okay, being able to read fluently, and being able to read expressively. And those things can be taught intentionally. And there's ways to do that that can have every kid doing reading and all getting practice on it, basically. And there's things about round robin reading that sabotage that. Like, it's like kids, when they read, when they're the one kid selected to read, it's shown they actually sub-vocalize compared to other ways that you set them up to read in terms of their expression and fluency when they know every other kid is listening. There's this other stuff. So anyway, this article goes into some research, some of the pitfalls of round robin reading, and then it gives alternatives and explains alternatives. I'd very much like you to read this. I think your classroom is a good classroom where you can take 2 or 3 of these strategies and start using them instead, and incorporating, getting every kid working on their fluency, working on their expressive reading, which will really help set them up for middle school better. And you do that well in your classroom. It's something we can do in the other classrooms as well. I have this little cheat sheet put together that goes over the alternative strategies that they offer in there that are backed by science and research. And then there's also a link to a video with each one, most of them from the Institute of Educational Sciences, that demonstrates an example of those being done in a real classroom. So I would like you to dig into that stuff. Okay, I'm not trying to put you down for using round robin reading. It's the traditional thing. It's the natural thing to do. It's what we most got growing up. But it is, it is basic. It is well established in educational research that there's better ways to do reading, and that's what we want. Okay, Jazakallahu khairan. Barakallahu fiki. Anything good that came from this comes from Allah. Anything wrong that comes from it comes from the deficiencies in myself. I seek repentance from Allah, and I bear witness that there is none worthy of worship but Him alone.